You are listening to Aim Higher, a Catholic podcast designed to instruct and to encourage the daily practice of our faith. Pax et Bodum, peace and good to you all. This is Aim Higher. I'm Father Anthony with Sister Catherine, and today we're going to talk about, well, it's going to be an ongoing topic, not necessarily meaning we're going to do it each episode in a row on it.
Yeah.
Because, variety is the spice of life. So we might not, we might be inspired to talk about something else instead. But we're going to talk about the religious life, and particularly about the entrance into religious life, what to expect going into it, and then the day-to-day routine. Because when you establish what to expect, you really lay down the groundwork of everything it's meant to be a religious, be it a Franciscan, a Dominican, a Benedictine, or any of the others. Then when you really learn the spirituality of each religious order, and you implement that to your daily life, then it becomes part of you, not just the thing that you walked into one day and said, oh, this is interesting, let me give it a try, but it becomes your life. And then when you are separated from that regularity, it can become difficult due to duty, having to be by yourself or something. But what we want to focus upon now is the beginnings. Now, everything that we know has a beginning except God himself, who has no beginning and no end, but we have a beginning. All religious orders had a beginning. And we're going to go into, and we'll probably go into some of our own experiences and what to be expected. So, I think that's a good intro on all that, so. Sister. I think so. Kind of shoot from the hip. And I might add that we kind of just decided to do this because it was just flowing in the conversation. So let's talk about this.
We had a completely different episode planned. And
then it just, you know what? Let's talk about this because this is important. And these are questions that certainly young people have, because they're at the cusp of having to make an important decision. And what makes it so important is because it's, what does God want me to do with my life? What is his will for me? Because remember, in the Roman Catholic Church, we narrow it down to three basic vocations that a person can follow. One is the married life. This is the one most people enter into, right? A man and a woman come together in holy matrimony with the intention of bringing forth children and helping each other in the path towards holiness. Second one is the single life. There are some people out there who are not meant to be married. I'm sure we've met a few of them. We can say, yeah, I can see why they're not married. And they were not called to the religious life. So their function in society would be one more of a person who helps aid those who are married, and maybe an instruction at church on Sundays. They're being an example, being more like a big brother and a big sister, or an aunt and uncle type of thing to them, and primarily being an example and an important cog in society. And finally, the religious life, where the person abandons, or I should actually say, freely gives up all those rights and prerogatives that you have as a single person because maybe you can get married, maybe you can have children. This is something you are giving up, not for a natural reason, not for an aversion to things in particular, because you just want to get away from the world, but you're giving it up for the spiritual, for a supernatural cause. And this is why it is one that I think that people could get misconceptions on of what it means to be religious, how to even begin, and the question is, do you have a vocation? How do you know? And so, what are those like early indicators that a person could have a vocation?
Are you asking me?
Yeah, sure. Why not, sister? I'll ask you because
Well,
yeah,
it's not to me, it's not an easy question. And that actually
no,
is
it's not.
a question I got quite a bit from people. It's like, well, how did you know?
Yep,
And
yep,
the truth is, how do you know with any vocation, even any career choice you make, how do you know
yeah.
that's the right one? And for me, it got to a point that things were falling into place that I really couldn't ignore it. Um, and I knew I just had to try. And so, because I don't think when I was really young, I ever really considered it. But I also look
Mm-hmm.
at, I didn't really consider a whole lot about the future. I didn't have like this, oh, I really want to be a mother. I really want to be a mother. I was definitely a mother hen, loved being around children. I remember when one of our cousins was born when I was 8 years old. I mean, I loved that little girl. I loved being around her. I mean, it was at a point where any family function, the mom and dad are like, oh, great, she's here. She'll watch the baby. And yes, of course I would.
Mm-hmm.
So, in that detail, people think, well, she's clearly meant for marriage. And that's not necessarily true because religious sisters are like spiritual mothers. So you could definitely do a lot of nurturing in that role too. Um, I would say probably at somewhere in my 20s, here and there, perhaps the idea popped in. I do remember, I think it was in 2008. So I would have been 26. And I do kind of remember saying, I don't think you remember this, and our other brother wouldn't remember it either, but just saying, if I had all my debt cleared, I would go enjoy the religious life. But I think it was a very, not the right intention. I think I was just tired of the world, tired of responsibility. And that is not a good reason uh, to join the religious life. I mean,
I
it's
mean,
something maybe
solely for that.
right. I mean, maybe that was God just kind of planting the seed there, and he might have started earlier and I was just really that dense. I don't know. I mean, I do remember when I was younger, because we were fortunate enough to have a Dominican sister in our lives. And my first year of school, it was just our older brother and I when the school started out. So I had her all to myself. That was like my best year of school because I had that individual time and I probably got the best grades that year out of all the rest of the years.
Mm-hmm.
So I do remember there was a point in my life I wish I could have lived with her, but I think it was just to get away from you boys. So also not, I would say that was like, oh, she must want to be religious.
No,
Anyway,
we were quite the bunch.
so
So
it's not like this aha moment, like lightning strikes and it's just so obvious. I do think there is a lot of
you don't hear the angels singing. No.
there's a lot of it's sensible to kind of just um truly think about it, not overthink about it, which it tends to
Yeah.
be my nature too.
Yeah. I mean.
But I will say it was probably in 2012 a friend of mine approached me with the idea, and that's when I probably really started to seriously think about it. And I remember the last time I saw Bishop Lewis, and the last words he ever said to me is like, "Do you want to be a nun? I'm a man that can make that happen." And I think he said, "I'm the man that can make that happen."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Father Bernard was there. So later on in that weekend, he did come up to me. He's like, Bishop Lewis has a pretty good point. And so I was wrestling with that for a few years. And when you
Mm-hmm.
really think about that, that's 2012. And 3 years later, I was in Rochester.
Mhm.
Um, it was just kind of a gradual thing. I was also a bit older,
Mhm.
but I had made a visit in 2014 out to Rochester and stayed with friends for a few weeks. And at that time, there was the girls' school, and I spent a lot of time here. I felt really drawn here. Um, but I wouldn't have necessarily like, oh, I want to be religious. I enjoyed being here.
Mhm.
And I do remember one Sunday sitting and talking with Bishop Giles, and um, it was after mass, and I don't know, something in the sermon just got to me. So I'm bawling my eyes out. Just all the feelings of just wanting to know God more. I mean, and the thing is, I spent a number of my life just kind of, I grew up with the catechism, but I feel like I didn't really know God. So it was probably, my
Mhm.
late 20s, I really started to cultivate that and really wanting to dive in deeper.
Mhm.
And, we were just talking, and at one point he just said to me, "Do you ever see yourself getting married?" And I just looked at him with my crocodile tears, and I just shook my head no. But then that was the extent of it, right? Because he wasn't going to push,
No.
which is, you know,
You don't push, you plant.
right. And also he didn't want to like get too, I guess, attached to the idea of a possibility because, he's been down that road before where people, say one thing and then it doesn't end up happening. You just you remain calm.
Mhm. Mhm.
And then shortly after I went down to Kentucky for the third hour retreat because I was a cord bearer and cord bearers are allowed to go. And really nice retreat. I always enjoy going down to that. And I sat talking with Father Joseph Sunday for a couple of hours, and he kind of brought up religious life too. And um, one of the things that kind of at that point is like, well, would it work? Is that you have to have your debt cleared. And I had a little bit of debt left. I think a little bit of student loans, just little things,
Mhm.
not extreme. And when, this is how God was really working this out for me because I ended up getting um, an old boss of mine searched for months to try to find me. He lost my number and offered me an opportunity with this job for extra income. And so I took it, and that was the extra income that got me to pay off that debt quicker. I mean, I felt kind of bad. I kind of knew that I wasn't going to stay very long at this, but God had a plan there
Yeah,
too.
yeah, yeah, but
Um,
you didn't know how very long was going to be, so,
right.
it's not like you
And
were deceptive.
right. And I will say that I did get them back to what I did the job I was supposed to do. I got them
Mhm.
what they needed done.
Mhm.
Um, And God provided when the time came that I cleared my debt and I was ready to go, that I was able to find them the perfect person for that job.
Yep,
So
she's
God
still
worked that
there,
all out. So
and
yes,
she's still there, and she's happy,
she's
so
very happy. So really wonderful moment. Um, but I remember the bishop, it was that fall 2014. So I didn't know like Bishop Giles had any idea that I was kind of thinking about that, because I didn't want to be like too vocal about it because you
Mhm.
don't know. And mom and I went down for his 30th anniversary, and I was sitting there talking to Brother Pascal, and the bishop came and sat down and talked to me. And he didn't bring it up. We just talked. And um and he came to Wisconsin the following month, and I asked to talk to him, and then we did talk. Um he
What
came
did
for
he
I think he came for confirmation in November or
Oh,
something.
okay.
You were down in Lubbock at this
Oh,
point.
I know where I was.
And I'm sorry that this is taking so long, but I feel like this backstory is kind of
No,
important.
continue,
Okay.
continue. It's kinda nice to be the one listening.
Okay. And so we talked, and he just asked, well, how long? And I kind of thought maybe spring. It ended up being that fall. And I will say that I didn't have a complete I didn't know exactly what I was getting into. I basically knew I had to try. God provided so that I was debt free. Um I just knew at this point I had to give it a shot. And a couple people were
Mhm.
like, "Well, what about, this job and what if it doesn't work out? What will you do?" I said, "Well, I have complete faith that if this truly is not my vocation, then God will work something else out if that's the case. If I have to
Mm-hmm.
go back in the world and find a job, God will provide, because I just know that I have to try. I have to honestly say I gave it a shot to rule it out. I was pretty certain at that point that this was my vocation. And it's not because, I was in my early 30s, which is kind of old, by the way,
Yeah.
and not married. And I will say, just because a woman is in her early 20s, mid 20s, late early 30s and not married does not mean she has a religious vocation. Doesn't mean it
No.
at all. If I wanted to be married, I absolutely could have gotten married. Um,
Yeah.
oh, definitely. It just, there was a lot of, I I won't get into
I,
why.
I I always thought you were quite the catch.
Oh, thank you. Thank
You're
you.
welcome. I'm a
I
little
don't agree, but
biased, but I had a brother-in-law all picked out.
you did.
You just didn't give him the time of day. I wonder how he's
Well,
doing.
no, to be
He's
fair, he
probably
and I did
married.
go out on a couple of coffee. I wouldn't call them dates. We were just catching up because we were coworkers too.
Yeah.
And he definitely did not believe in organized religion.
Yeah.
So
Well, that you
kind of a
can't. Yeah.
problem.
Yeah. You can't
I
do it then.
I was not willing to marry someone that was just going to let me practice my Catholic faith and let
Mm-hmm.
me bring my children to church. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. We grew up in a
Mm-hmm.
divided home. I did not want that. So
Mm-hmm.
anyway, so I just want
Mm-hmm.
to point that out, that I did not choose religious life because I failed out in the world. I absolutely could have gotten married if that was what God wanted. I absolutely could have had um a job that would have provided, but I just knew I had to give this a try. And I went here not really knowing what to expect, but just had complete trust. Had trust that the bishop knew what he was doing. And I always refer to myself as his test dummy. So, and it's been an exciting adventure, and it's still an adventure. Every day is really, really exciting. I know a lot of people ask me like, "What's your day like?" We'll get into that at some point. It's never boring, and I am glad that I decided to give it a go. And one of the things I think people don't realize, what to expect, where to begin, is that you begin with a postulancy, a 6 months postulancy, and you're
Mm-hmm.
slowly integrated into the schedule. So you're trying it out. You're seeing what it's like. The church actually gives you a lot of time before making it permanent. I've only been in made my solemn profession last August. So, and I will be in this October, I will have been here 7 years already, if you can believe it. Um, Time flies when you're having fun. And
Mm-hmm.
um, I even last summer when we were down in Kentucky, it was a month before I took those vows. I even said, like, as of right now, I could still walk away. I could still walk away from this.
Mm-hmm.
I knew once I got out of my novitiate, which is a 2-year novitiate, by the way. I knew. I mean, I think I knew right when I was invested, to be honest, maybe even just before then. So, I guess that's the end of my rambling. I don't know. It's just,
It's not rambling.
it's just, I hope it was something interesting for people to know. And I guess with that said, if there is a young person that just isn't sure, um, first of all, you talk to your priest, it's like to kind of work it out. But just know that if you come out here, and that's what I'm encouraging some younger people, like, well, come for a visit. If you come here
Mm-hmm.
for a visit, we're not putting you in a habit right away.
No.
Um,
No.
that doesn't happen until after your postulancy anyway. But even if you came out for a visit, couple weeks, just attend mass, we could have some talks and kind of just see what the life is like. That is an option. Just so you know, that is an option. Um, and I would, recommend it. Don't, like I said,
That's
the church takes its time with this. Yeah.
and that's and that is the way to do it. You introduce a person to the life in a very casual, not committal way.
Mhm.
Visiting people will go on retreats to monasteries and to other retreat centers. This doesn't mean they're signing up to enter religious life,
Mhm.
but they're taking a recluse from their normal daily activities to focus more upon their spirituality. And that's why retreats are so wonderful.
Yes.
And I love going to them or one day conducting one. Um, you know, you bring up like so many things, and the thing that popped in my head is how um how do I want to word this? Um, the struggle we have in the world today because of the position in the church and how things are going, being part of what people would call our traditional Catholic community. I say we're a Roman Catholic community, but you didn't have the 4 or 5 priests in your diocese. You could walk down the street or down a few blocks to another parish and they're all Catholic. You didn't have that. I actually yesterday we were down with Dad. He went with me on a communion call, and we were on the south side. And he took me to we were in St. Francis, so he took me to the seminary.
Really?
Yeah, and I thought I was there before, but actually I was over at St. Mary's College, not in St. Mary's College. That's no, Mary's High School. I think I got the name right. Um, so that's where I was before. I never actually went to the university. He showed me the minor seminary where he went to school.
Mm-hmm. That's
I
cool.
was like, this is awesome. And I got it. And the grounds are beautiful. I was like, I don't know if, what I would want more to be going to the seminary or to be a grounds worker, because that's either one I think is a
Mm-hmm.
win.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just so neat to see, like, this is where Dad went to school. So obviously Dad went to the minor seminary. That is a high school level for any young men who show an interest in the priesthood. They're not committing to anything. They're not signing on the dotted line. It is just furthering their education. And not every one of them goes on to the priesthood. Some of them might finish their whole year, their whole 4 years, and say, we don't really think you're a candidate for the major seminary. Our father was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going into the details of why they said that. I'm not even sure he fully knows. But that's an example where you accept the guidance of a superior and you say, all right, then I will go out into the world and make do of it. And it was just so neat to see that place. And Dan
That's
said,
cool.
this is where the dorms were. That's where I slept when I stayed there. But then I would stay with your great grandfather, and he showed me where that was. He showed me the house where Grandma and Aunt Maggie uh, were raised. So, uh, and then we also drove around the major seminary.
Very nice.
I didn't realize that the major seminary was right next to the minor one. Didn't realize it. Uh, but we're driving around. This is so beautiful. The grounds are just well kept. It's like in a wooded area.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even realize you're not too far from downtown Milwaukee. It's so great. And it just gave a little bit of history on that. And as we were driving out, it says, if things were different, this is probably where I would have been going,
Mm-hmm.
for minor seminary than major seminary, but that's not the way it was. And so it brings up those questions. Since you don't have that outlet and you're trying to encourage young people to seek God's will, to seek for religious vocation, how do you do it? And like you said, you didn't see sisters, you didn't see third order sisters teaching or doing other works of charity. You didn't know what the life is like,
Mm-hmm.
and there had to be somebody to kind of bite that bullet and to give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
And we said before on this podcast, we're just hoping this is the beginning.
Yes.
Like, we're praying for vocations. And how do you know? It's kind of the question. And you don't really know for certain, as long as you enter into your life with, I want to do God's will. Now, doing God's will is something that spreads out to many areas in your life. Okay, uh, you want to do God's will insofar as you do not want to commit sin. You want to grow in holiness. You want to live a good Catholic life. That's doing God's will. You want to be a child of God, then grow to be a soldier of God, and then, but what specifically now does He want me to do? That is not always so clear because these are things um, that we can give some general guidelines towards. And the sister and I were talking about that before we press the record button. There's
Mhm.
certain general guidelines I can give to say what would make a good candidate for religious life. And I wrote them down. You know, like, what do you need? You have to be of the right age. Okay. Generally speaking, you're finished high school. So 17, 18, somewhere around there is usually when a young person would enter into religious life. The knowledge of their faith. Okay, well, knowledge of their faith and the proper sacraments go hand in hand. So a person has to know their 10 commandments, the Apostles' Creed, laws of the church, the basics of the catechism, the sacraments, their prayers, and then going to confirmation, the continuing education, and hopefully, if they had the fortunate circumstance to give a high school education, to continue on with that knowledge. But you have to have a basic knowledge of your faith. It's like St. Francis, our Holy Father, as a requirement, said, you must be a Catholic. Not just Catholic in name only. You have to
Mhm.
be a practicing Catholic. You have to be one who is striving to live the Catholic life. So you need to have that. And you have to be someone, and if you're truly striving for this, you would have a certain moral character. Doesn't mean that you are completely flawless or you're sinless. It just means that you have a reputation, and it's one that you take very seriously. You don't want people to think ill of you, not because of any earthly gain, but because your good name is a reflection of who you are, especially before the sight of God. And these are things that you take into consideration of a person. If you have that desire, and that's the thing, a desire to serve God being your base, then you say, now, where does God want me to go from here? We said those are the three vocations. Now you have other not religious, denominations. I've had a conversation with a friend of mine who's a Lutheran. Says, well, we believe there are more than just three vocations. No, a vocation to be a doctor. A person has a vocation to be a lawyer. A person's vocation to be that. I was like, okay, I get what you're saying, but those are not fundamental vocations. Those are the accidentals that apply to a person who are either in the married state or the single state. Yeah, some religious orders could be doctors, but we won't get into that right now. That is not so necessary when we're talking about a person following God's will. So we're not. What if you become a doctor? What if you decided later on you wanted to become a physicist? No longer being a medical doctor, but a physicist. Did you now break away from your vocation? Okay, so you got to understand what we mean here. These three basic vocations are the fundamentals, and uh, you you can't really give like what are you looking for in a person other than what I gave you, those general
Right.
things. Like, what sort of temperament would you have, like being in going to religious
Yeah,
life?
yeah,
What
we were
type of
talking about
temperament
that.
would you have to be a married person? You have people, some people who are more passionate, other people are more melancholy, some people are more outgoing, others are introvert. There's so many things to say, well, a person can say, well, I really don't, I really have a hard time speaking in public. So obviously God doesn't want me to become a priest because I would have to preach. So that might not be, must not be my vocation. Not necessarily. That could just be an obstacle that God wants you to overcome to better
Mhm.
yourself, to humble yourself. That could be it.
Yes.
Uh,
I just think of many things that I do now that I never would have
yeah.
thought
Mm.
I was doing, like a podcast.
Well, yeah. Well, let's just say a willingness.
Yes.
You have to be willing. You might not succeed, and it might not be something you're expected to do all the time, but you're willing to do what you are asked,
Mhm.
willing to give it a try. And as we
Mhm.
said, you say, God, just I want to know that I gave it a fair try.
Mhm.
And eh, and you talk about the person who, let's say, that that things are not going well in the world. That they tried this profession or that profession, they weren't succeeding. They said, well, maybe I'll give religious life a try. Why not? That's not really the attitude you want. I remember reading an article down in Texas because they had these ordinations, and this young man who was already like 25, 26 says, yeah, I went to college and I tried this, I tried that. I just wasn't succeeding. So I say, yeah, I'll give this a try. Okay, the religious life, the priesthood is not a profession that you just casually give a try. It's something that you are going to dedicate the rest of your life to. You make
Mhm.
vows to God; those vows are binding. Okay,
Mhm.
you can't just decide, hey, I'm changed my mind. I don't want to do this anymore. That's not how it works. Like, oh,
Mhm.
I want to get married now. No, that's not how it works. So you have to make sure to the best of your ability that is this what I want? And who can I go to guide me on this path? Like Sister said, go to your priest, talk to your confessor, um, make a visit.
Mhm.
Don't let yourself get culture shocked by just signing up and then just going right in. That's not usually how it works. They have you go through
Right. Well,
a
and I'll
whole
say it's
process.
really easy to talk yourself out of it too,
Oh
just
yeah.
in the sense that before I came here, um I was with our parents, and I had a job that worked from home part-time, and so I was there helping our mother, and our brother was ill. And I also spent a lot of time helping out our brother who's married and his kids, and then a family friend and their kids. And
hmm
I mean, it was a very full life, and I had my hands in a lot of things. And you would think, well,
hmm
obviously, this is what God wants you to do, is to be like that helping hand for everybody else, which is not a bad thing.
No,
And
for
I could have
some people
definitely
it might.
convinced myself to see that, but then
Couldn't also been a bit of a comfort level though.
probably because what was going through my mind is that because there is a lot of there was a lot of back and forth. It's like, well, if I leave, then who's going to do this and who's going to do that? And is that a selfish choice? Am I being selfish by going to the religious life? And it did finally dawn on me that yes, I'm doing all these things, but there's so much more I can do for not me, everyone, but do so
Mhm.
much more um
Mhm.
being here. And you might not see that in the beginning, because definitely, and we've talked about this recently, how simple things were when you're in your novitiate or when you were a seminarian. Yes, you were studying a lot,
Yeah.
but things have definitely changed over the years for me,
Mhm.
taking on a lot um,
Responsibilities. Yep.
more responsibilities. And it's a wonderful thing. Like I said, do have a lot of fun. I like to tell people I actually do get to do what I want, because I think that's kind of a hang up for people. It's like, well, now you're not going to be able to do whatever you want. Well, if what you want is God's will, then yes, I get to do whatever I want because I want to do God's will. So,
And then you get to then explore things
yes,
that you wouldn't have tried if you're in the
absolutely
world.
not.
Like for me, I do not think I would ever be writing articles like I do.
Mhm.
I always thought that it was not something that I could do well. I always, I never thought myself stupid. but I certainly didn't consider myself an intellectual in academia.
Mhm.
There are people out there so you still shouldn't think yourself that way. I said, yeah, but I can objectively say I know a lot more. I didn't think I was going to get that enthralled in philosophy,
Mhm.
especially than I did. I said I never thought to think this way.
Mhm.
It's a kind of interesting way of putting it. But
Mhm.
and then what do I get to do now? I travel. I never thought I'd be driving to different, parts of the state, different states. I never thought that I would, uh, going, flying different places to give the sacraments or to cover for another priest or assist, especially for me, to assisting uh, during ceremonies in that way, and which I
Mhm.
really enjoy doing. I said I would love to be the master of ceremonies, not anything else, just the master of ceremonies, and get the stage manage because that's
There
like
you
my
go.
background.
Mhm.
That's what I did.
Right.
Um, so it is, you get to flourish.
Mhm.
God doesn't destroy your talents and your gifts, but he elevates them. He helps you to
Yes.
improve upon them, and
Yes.
you're doing it for God's love.
I've got my hands in so many things that I didn't think were possible. And I will say that His Excellency is very encouraging,
Hmm.
because I had a lot of perfectionist tendencies. And if I couldn't, the mentality, if I couldn't get it right away, obviously I'm not meant to do this.
Do you
And
still fight with that? Because I still fight with that.
not as much
I
anymore
still fight
because
with that one once in a
probably because the
while.
bishop's just like, well, what's the worst can happen? You fail, you try again, you'll learn something from it. I mean, I had no knowledge of sewing prior to coming here.
Hmm.
I had an interest when I was about 11 and our great aunt was showing me and I just got overwhelmed and
Hmm.
that ended. And coming here, one of the first things I learned how to make was my habit. And then there had to be
Hmm.
a wimple and a veil and a scapular. And then through a contact, a lady actually came and taught me some more fundamentals of sewing. And now I make dresses for girls in need. And I do try to share some of those elements on our social media, talking with people, trying to, because I know people are curious, like, well, what can I expect? What can I do? Trust me, if you've got some sort of talent, we're going to put it to use because there is computer
Yep.
work, putting together the calendar, the serif,
Hmm.
working on the cherub. Um, I'm starting to do some educational stuff with children. I teach classes. Um,
You may find that, like, especially, we're talking especially for the sisters here, but even for brothers, if you're going to the seminary, your job is mainly to be studying here. But we know what the sisters get to do, or if we had a community of lay brothers,
mhm,
you may find that it's like, it's just your skill level isn't really equipped for computers. It's just you're just not good for that. Well, like, I'm more like gardening. I like gardening. Okay, then you go and garden. It's
mhm,
like you go. He's like, I love the chickens. As raise the chickens. Okay, you do that, and you can even
yeah,
cultivate, make fertilizer, and
yep,
and if this is what your interest is, and you might even find that you have an interest in that once you
yes,
give it a try. And it's just, like raising bees. Bishop Giles has got bees. It's like, I'd
mhm.
like to help. It's like, okay, we'll show you how to do it. He says, all right, that's your responsibility. I get to move over to my koi fish. It's like, I'm interested in koi. Back away, that's my thing. No.
Yeah, we all
But
share and everything.
I know we all share responsibilities and
Mhm,
enjoy it. But it's the thing that, you know Saint Benedict laid the groundwork for a community life. Ora et labora, prayer and work.
mhm,
And by work, it's not like, you're slaving yourself, working a 12-hour shift, going 100 miles an hour, and killing yourself to make the quota for your work. Not necessarily it always is like that, as we both have had regular jobs,
mhm,
okay, but it's more a leisurely paced. um you get the job done, and you want to get it done well and get it done soon. But oftentimes you can just leave it and come back to it. You can leave it to go to pray and come
mhm,
back to finish it and improve on it. It's a different type of schedule. and and your basis is like following the divine office
Mhm.
and that. But when you don't have as many brothers or sisters available, it becomes harder because you have to take on several
Mhm.
responsibilities. So it's you have to pace yourself,
Yes.
and it's just, if you do your best, is for the love of God, as Bishop Giles taught me many years ago. Says, is it, if you do you feel you did your best? Says, yeah, okay, then that's fine. So, but how do I know? Is like, well, do you think you did a bad job? Well, I don't know. Then maybe you should just go check on it again. Okay, I'll do that. But it, it it's not boring.
Mm-mm.
I actually, when I was down in Lubbock, and I would take a walk every day. Went out to walk for 20 minutes, and I remember I was walking around uh, a playground area, and some of these kids, they saw me and asking me questions, and the kid's like, are you a monk? I says, yeah, I'm a monk. He said, do you do a lot of praying? I says, yeah. Then what are you doing out here? You should be inside praying. You should be in praying. You can't be out here. You got to be praying. And it's like, oh, young man, you don't really understand this. You
Right.
have to have a balance. If you
Mhm.
don't have a balance, you're going to snap
Mhm.
at one point.
Well, it's just one of those people just don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, when I came here, like I said, I didn't really have any idea, and we kind of
Hmm.
this grew as we went along, and I honestly thought I probably wouldn't leave the property all that much, which would have been fine, right?
No,
Um,
that's
I
so
I
nice.
I love it when I don't have to go anywhere, but some things do call us away. But um, there is a lot of value in going out and about, though, too. Running
Hmm.
errands.
Hmm.
I at least once a trip gets stopped, and usually it's like, "Wow, I haven't seen a sister in a full habit before," and they talk about how nice it is, and um, I
Hmm.
mean, I've had some people ask about where we were, what time is mass, but haven't really seen anybody come by yet. However, you have to have that interaction. You have to have that, I guess, a connection in a way. I mean, how
Hmm.
else are you going to um, help draw people to something that they haven't thought about? And I definitely strive to be upbeat, and I think that that's a natural thing. But one
Yeah.
of the cashiers at Aldi, I hadn't seen her in a couple of years, I think since before COVID, and she's like, "Oh, it's so great to see you," and just chatting up, and she's like, you just made my day," and I said, "Well, I do try to be friendly. I do, and it's not an act. I actually do really feel very happy. I think, my resting face is usually kind of just serious thinking. So I realize that when I'm out and about, I don't really want to have that face too much because then people are like, oh my gosh, she must be so unhappy.
Be, yeah.
And that makes
Be.
me think of, I'm sorry, I just want to tell one little story. It was the first year after I was invested, and it was around Christmas time. I had to go up to the store to get something, and that's at the time we had the bell ringers. And this lady she sees me, she goes, "Oh, so young to make that decision." I said, "Well, I'm going to be 34 my next birthday, so I'm not really all that young. I'm actually technically kind of too old. Exceptions were made, can be made, but we won't get into that." So it's just kind of interesting that because people just really don't know, and they think that you're ruining your life by making this choice. Um,
It's interesting, society has moved towards telling young people wait a while before making decisions, such as whether to get married or to enter religious life. Common A lot of young people now are getting married in their 30s. Before, they were
mhm,
getting married in their early 20s. And now it's like later and later and later. Now, I'm not saying that find someone in your 20s, get married. I'm just saying that you know you're better off waiting for the right person if that's your vocation. It just
mhm,
it reminds me. I've said to people, I said, I have many times I've thought about being a father. I like the idea of being a father. It's just being a husband, I don't think I could do. I don't think I could be a husband. I don't have the right temperament for a husband. But I love children. I love being teaching children and playing with children and helping them. And they say do what you love, and then you'd be happy. And if what you love is to do God's will, then no matter what you do, you will be doing what you love, pretty much
Mhm.
like you said before, sister. So
Yes.
what we encourage in this, because we're going to have to be wrapping this up, we're well
Yes.
over our time.
We're
But we're
trying to trim it, I
we're
promise. It's
trying,
just
we're
not
trying. But
it's not working.
we will get to there. We will get there,
That's why
because
we're
we're
gonna
gonna
do this in steps.
they're doing it in steps. But the next part, we're gonna go more into discussing the postulancy, the novitiate. We already tell like kind of what you deal with, but
Mhm,
even the first impressions that we have had when we entered in, I mean, that with
mhm,
that immediate impression,
mhm.
these are the type of things go into and how the life progresses, and how do you come and you're making that decision, you're making that call to say, let's give it a try. Because
Yes.
remember, when you go to religious life, you're not running away from the world, you're running towards God. If
Mhm.
you have that in mind, if you're not just doing it because your life is horrible and you might as well, no. If you're doing it because you want to grow closer to God in holiness, and then maybe if it is your vocation to affect other people and to inspire them to holiness and to a greater purpose, which is their salvation.